Japan's still kind of it's a closed-off country, right? A lot of the Japanese guys, especially, they prefer female that are a lot more feminine and thinner and skinnier. In America, a lot of girls prefer guys that are more bigger, built, stronger. And over here, it's a little bit more like skinny, slim. You look good in clothes. You look like a model.
Welcome to Unpacking Japan. I'm Toby, and today I'm sitting here with Toshi. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks for having me. It's great.
Toshi, you work as a clinical research associate in Tokyo.
Yes,
you
sir.
do research for a contractor for pharmaceutical companies in the health fitness industry.
Yeah.
And today we want to talk a little bit about health and fitness standards in Japan, how they're growing, how they're changing, and maybe comparing them a little bit to the United States where you grew up. Is
Yes,
that
sir.
correct?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So before we dive into all of this, maybe could you introduce yourself a little bit more to let our listeners know about your background?
Yeah, of course. Well, my name is Toshi. I actually was born in Yokohama City in Japan, and spent some time down there, and then moved to California, came back to Japan, spent a few years actually until 7th grade.
Okay.
And then moved back to States, this time Texas, and finished middle school, and then high school, and then moved to Fort Worth, Texas in college. Anybody who's from Fort Worth, shout out.
So you grew up mostly in the United States?
For the most part, yeah.
Cool. And then when you were doing all of this, doing all of this growing up basically, how did you get interested in this health and fitness, and what kind of led you to this?
Yeah, so it's a long story, but I'm going to sum it up. So I grew up playing sports all my life, right? Did baseball, did swimming, did a lot of different sports that I can think of. I just was never great at racket sports, tennis.
Racket sports are tricky.
It's a little bit different story, but I think I was doing great, pretty decent for a teenage kid, and I got injured pretty bad in my high school year. Actually, I hurt my lower lumbar spine.
Okay.
And I had a little nervous issues with the lumbar spine. And I was seeing a lot of doctors, a lot of physical therapists, and those guys helped me through my entire high school career. And I'm stronger now because of those guys, the foundation that those guys have built.
So the recovery process.
The recovery processes and the strength training process after that. So that was a big deal for me. And at that time, I slowly got interested into sports medicine. And first I thought it was all about, oh, you're the personal trainer, or you're doing some sort of like coaching, right? That's all you can think of.
Yeah, it's maybe the first idea that comes to mind.
Yeah, the very, very first idea. And it's only the tip of the iceberg, and got into college. And I actually majored in pre-med in America. So you have to go, in States, you have to go through college, and then you go to a medical school, and then you graduate to become a doctor.
I see.
So it's a very long, it's a longer process compared to Japan or other countries. So I wanted to become a doctor at some point. I don't know what I was thinking about. And I quit in the first semester, and I shifted towards biomechanics, exercise science, and sports medicine. That's how I kind of got into the industry. Yeah.
Why, I didn't ask, but why did you kind of move to the United States in the first place, away from Yokohama?
So my mom's side's family are from California, and my godparents, so my middle name's Joshua, she actually, the couple that gave me the middle name, they're from Texas. And then kind of have a little bit heritage.
So you kind of like a lot of family background there, and decided to stay for your education. And you study biomechanics, you get interested in the field. What makes you decide to bring that knowledge back to Japan instead of maybe staying in the United States?
Yeah, so throughout college, did a lot of athletic training with preceptors. I worked with a lot of collegiate sports teams, baseball, football, you name it, right? And after graduation, I worked for several sports medicine companies where they do like a contract work with the sports teams. Doesn't have to be a major leagues, minor leagues baseball team, like smaller community teams. I was working for them, I'll say about 4 or 5 months, and I learned a lot from those guys. I had a mentor back then that taught me a lot of the basics that I have now, and a lot of the theories and the ideas that I believe. So that was a great opportunity. And so kind of got into my personal story. So my dad, he had cancer 2 years ago, and I moved back to Japan from States last year, like end of last year. So that was one of the motives to come back, and kind of maybe I can go back to where I was from, like originality, right? I was still born here. So that was a great opportunity for me to bring that knowledge, bring what I experienced, what I saw over here back into Japan, because back in Japan, it's still kind of it's a closed off country, right? Even though a lot of foreigners are coming in, a lot of the, the Japanese pop cultures, animes, all that stuff's going out. Yeah. Not many things are coming into Japan.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. It's more tricky to kind of enter the country than to export from here.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're going to get into more like the health side and fitness side of the discussion. But before we do that, I want to understand a little bit more about your approach to it. So you have a background in biomechanics. So if I'm having a guess at it, this is kind of understanding basically how the inside of your body works together in terms of like just movements, tendons and bones and everything.
Sir. Basically, yeah.
And then you have this background and you worked in the sports field with athletes, and now you do research for pharmaceutical companies. So you try to understand the effects of some treatments on people. Is that correct?
Yeah, of course. So wisely, when you say a word sports medicine, it's so broad.
Yeah.
Because sports medicine, basically, it is more of a new idea, right? And like medical wise, like the Western medicine and the Eastern medicine, they're very, very different. The approach is different. Our anatomies were different back then. Because one might say, the Chinese old medicine might say, take this leaves, take this blah, 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 and now you're cured. Whereas Western medicine, we tend to want to kind of, open up and see what's inside, and all right, let's figure out what's wrong with you. And sports medicine is this is my beliefs. I wouldn't say this is the same for everybody who works in the sports medicine industry, but for me, I think sports medicine has its own very unique approach to medicine. It's of course like 80%, 90% of it's influenced by Western medicine, but some of the treatments we do are Eastern medicine, such as gua sha is a very Eastern influence treatment, like a cup-ins and all that. So those are all Chinese, old school approach to medicine. So it's very, very, it's a mixture of both.
How was it for you when you studied in the United States, right? So you learned this very Western approach to understanding how the body works and how it all clicks together.
Yes, sir.
And you arrive in Japan in a Japanese context. Did you feel like the approach to sports medicine was the same, or did you discover something quite different?
So it depends on the level. Depends on which level you're working at. Let's say you're working at a top level, right? Top collegiate level, professional level, and it's very, very Western influenced, science-based approach.
So let's say competitive baseball in Japan.
Yeah, competitive baseball.
Okay.
I haven't really worked at professional baseball setting in Japan, but I'm sure they do very science-based approach to treatment and recovery and stuff. But if you go down towards like high school, like mid-tier college to even like teenage, I think those comes into like very, very like rough kind of raw approach. Like, oh, you're hurt? Oh no, you're not hurt. Come on, get your mindset up and keep going. I mean, I understand that to an extent, but it depends on the level that you're working with and who you're working with and what they like. Depends on the coach. Depends on, there's a lot of different factors that plays in that.
Can you explain a little bit more than what exactly you do now as a clinical research associate?
So clinical research, so I work for a contract research organizations, and our sponsors or our clients are one of the bigger, huge names. I'm not going to put the names out there, but
pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah, pharmaceutical companies or medical companies where they want to develop new medicine. But you have to go through like ethics, board, like efficacy, effectiveness, side effects. You have to do all the research for different aspects of the medicine. And then now you get all the data, analyze it, and you bring it into a FDAs or PMDAs and like figure out like, hey, can we actually put out this medicine?
Is it basically safe to use for people?
Yeah, is it safe? Is there side effects? If there is one, how severe is it? Is it bad? Is it just like a headache? You're just gonna have a diarrhea, like like a lot of nauseousness here and there. Every medicine has side effects. Even ibuprofen, if you take too much, you could die from it.
Yeah.
So we work in that middle, within that where pharmaceutical companies
they want the research,
and then we come in and we take that information and we bring it into like the medical facilities and hey, there's some research. Would you like to participate?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So we're kind of the middle guy right there.
That's also probably an interesting field right now because up until very recently, for medicine to be approved in Japan, you had to do clinical trials within Japan.
Japan, yeah.
But I think there's a discussion now that it could possibly change because there were a lot of debates during COVID when the initial vaccines were being released in the West, but they were not yet tested within Japan and approved within Japan, and hence the vaccine delivery in Japan was like kind of half a year delayed compared to the United States.
So different laws, different regulations, and it gets a little bit tricky, but.
So, okay, we have a good understanding of your background and kind of where you're standing now. So I want to talk about the health and fitness industry because that's what you also work with a lot. And maybe broadly, how would you describe kind of health and fitness standards in Japan, perhaps in comparison with the United States where you kind of did your training?
So there's a idea of beauty standards in certain beauty standards in Japan, right? And I might get a lot of hate for this, but a lot of the Japanese guys, especially, they prefer female that are a lot more feminine and thinner and skinnier, right? And that I think that's the same in broad Asia, but in Japan specifically, I think they prefer women that are skinnier and slimmer and feminine and smaller, right?
So perhaps less athletic than in the
maybe
West.
less athletic. I'm not gonna get into like the edges of it, but like the majorities of it. And I think the Western side, I mean, especially in America, people prefer somebody who's more built, athletic, a little bit more thicker built than somebody who's super skinny and like obviously underweight.
Is it the same also the reverse is true with like Japanese men and their kind of standards?
I think so. There are some truth to that to an extent. Obviously, we're not going to get into like the specific fetishes and stuff, but like overall, guys are skinny over here too. Like a lot of them, the vast majorities are. And in America, a lot of girls prefer guys that are more bigger, built, stronger. And over here, it's a little bit more like skinny, slim. You look good in clothes. You look like a model. You look like a K-pop star, and like your money. You know,
the standards are very different, and you see it also perhaps in movies a lot. If you look at movies that are produced in the United States, a lot of maybe let's say broadly speaking, blockbuster movies. Always have this kind of hero persona that is very muscular, very defined. But in Japan, if you look at movies, even the heroes, they have a very strong skill that is at the front of it, but it's not necessarily about how the person looks. And this is also portrayed a lot in social media.
Yes, sir.
Do you notice a big difference in like social media, like what is going on social media in Japan in terms of like portraying beauty standards?
Yeah, for sure. I think because of how Japan, especially after COVID, a lot of the Western influences are coming in. I mean, it has been that way for a long time, but because all the Western movies, Hollywood movies are coming in, a lot of the Western, or not only Western, but foreign visitors are coming into Japan, and they have the idea, and now they've seen it. They've seen guys that's bigger, stronger, like built, like tight t-shirts and stuff. So I think they're gearing towards Western beauty standards little by little. There are some, it's still stronger, being skinny, that's the skinnier the better. And American side, especially the West Coast, more of a not conservative side, more of the liberal sides are gearing towards the Asian or the Japanese beauty standards. So they're kind of like facing towards each other now. Yeah.
Historically speaking, where do these standards in Japan come from?
That I am not sure. Because if I'm correct, back in the day, like early, like 8th century, 9th century, like over 1,000 years ago, I think, correct me if I was wrong, but the thicker you are as a female, the better you like, the more beautiful you've seen because of like the amount of food that you can afford, right?
So basically being well fed.
So
was
being
a sign of richness,
being well fed, being well built, a little bit thicker meant that equaled, safe for pregnancy. You're well fed, you're rich, you got money, so you're well educated. So that, I think that was the beauty standards back in the day, like in the early like 8th century, 9th century. But I don't know how that kind of shifted towards how it is now, where skinnier the better. Even a lot of girls want to have a really slim waist and slim hip on top of it. That's kind of endangers a lot of the medical. It turns into the medical side, but yeah.
So if we now kind of basically from this image of being skinnier is better, do you see in your research, for example, any kind of negative consequences to this kind of trend to not have, for example, a certain level of muscle mass?
Yeah. So being skinny is great and all. Of course, there's a
spectrum of skinny.
Spectrum, and there's a room of where you're healthy, right? Like a BMI, like let's take BMI, like above 18, 19, up to 23, 24 is considered healthy and normal weight.
So this kind of BMI measurement is also used in Japan?
It does, yeah. I think it's a universal standard. Like it calculates your height and your weight, and then you'll take a number out, and then like, let's see where you're at. But picture this, if you're, I'm like 5'9", 5'10", and I weighed about 180 pounds.
I have no idea what that is.
So let's put that in kilograms. So I think I weighed about 80 kilograms, somewhere around there, in the ballpark of 80 to 78 or something. And I'm about 175, 4 centimeters height. So I'm decently average as far as the height goes, but I'm definitely bigger on the build. So like I come off as overweight if I go to like a medical, like a physical test with the doctor, and they'll mark it as overweight. But like, if you're an athlete, if you're built, let's say if you play football, like rugby, you're obviously going to have a lot more muscle mass than the average person. So it is a great reference. It is used as a reference, but I don't think that's the best way and the only way that you should be evaluating somebody's health because of that number. Yeah.
But then if you look at the statistics here in Japan and you look at the average BMI, it's maybe on the lower side.
Yeah,
so what are the consequences of this? Maybe health problems you regularly see occur?
So that gets into the part that I wanted to talk about is female athlete triad. So it is eating disorders, menstrual disturbances, and you also could potentially have low bone mineral density. These three, we call it female athlete triad. We call it FAT. I think nowadays people call it like the FAT is, doesn't roll well.
It's not a suitable
great
acronym.
It is not a great word. So I think it's called a REDS or something now. Correct me if I was wrong, but like having severe lower weight, like underweight, it could lead you to having low mineral bone density and having eating disorders. It could potentially lead to menstrual disturbances, which can get into like PMS and having trouble actually getting pregnant.
So ideally, people here should perhaps adjust their diet a little bit. But then, interestingly, if we look at maybe general media or statistics on longevity, Japan is one of the countries where people live the oldest. It's a country that has a diet that is often regarded as one of the healthiest in the world because it's a well-balanced meal. And on the other hand, in the United States, there is an increasing number of cases of obesity with numbers reaching, 20-30% of the population.
Yes, sir. It's disturbingly high. It's kind of insane. This is what I think of Japanese culture, like of eating culture versus American eating culture. because of how like the Japanese like people like since back in the day, we weren't hunters. Japanese people aren't hunters. They're farmers. They'll grow rice crops and you eat whatever you get, right? Whereas in America, it's like, of course, I mean the Indians and then the Western came in, and it's basically like protein, animal product rich diet ever since like the early, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So there's a huge difference between like how we like as an ancestral biology and blood that comes into the play. Like, I'm not sure. I don't know if there's any studies that actually proves this, but because Japanese people grew up and their ancestors being only eating crops and rice, starches, and some beans, their body kind of and their digestive system kind of geared towards eating stuff that's very specific to where they are. Versus in America, it's like a lot of people prefer animal diet still, because that's how they grew up. Like their ancestral eating diet, like dietary habits were animal-based products. So there, I think, is a huge difference in between like how we digest food and how we like conserve that energy and utilize it as a day-to-day basis, like ATPs and stuff.
So genetically speaking, certainly there's differences between maybe people that are native in America and people that are native to Japan. But if we look more specifically at the modern diet, right?
Yeah, the modern diet.
The modern diet in Japan, there's also equally available amounts of meat than in the United States. Yet the diet, generally speaking, is perhaps more balanced, maybe less processed food than in the United States. And still, from the research and what you see, there is a tendency here for people to be skinnier than they need to be. Why do you think this diet that is considered healthy is leading to that? So
I think overall, the Japanese diet is great for when you look at the nutritional balance. Ideally, you have a little bit more protein rather than just having rice, miso soup, and some sides. But like traditional Japanese cuisine, I think it's great. It has a great balance, like protein, carbs, and fats. But yet, yes, people are very, very still a little bit underweight, and like overall, maybe because they're lacking protein, and it comes into like an aspects of beauty standards, and people don't work out as much. Once they get into the working force, like once you graduate high school, college, they kind of stop playing sports and stop going, like they don't really go to the gym. So that may be one of the reasons why Japanese people tend to be a little bit underweight compared to like the global standards.
So talking about the part of exercising, doing physical exercise to kind of go together with the diet. I do a lot of exercise here, and I do see people going to the gym. I do see a lot of people running. I know that running is a sport that's very popular in Japan.
Big,
what kind of trends do you see here in terms of exercising, if you compare with the United States, in terms of the type of exercise, maybe the frequency and the intensity?
So in America, well, I'm going to narrow it down to Texas. There are a lot of like CrossFit based gym. There are a lot of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, MMA gyms. You just have a little bit more easier access to the gym.
So, but those three, I would say, are very physically intense.
Very, very intense. Very, very intense. And it's kind of hard to get into. But there are some classes like F45s, if you know what it is. It's like a circuit training course, or like it's a gym, but there's a coach and it's a group training course. I think it's like 45 minutes. It's very, very intense. I've done it a couple times. One of my close friends, he's a coach at F45s. And a commercial gym too, like Elite Fitness, like Anytime Fitness, 24-hour fitness are very, very accessible.
But Anytime Fitness, for example, is quite readily available in Japan.
It is over here, very, very. And I think one of the aspects of, so I think the Japanese gyms are very, very overpriced or very expensive. Rephrase that.
Yeah, I've had friends that come from the United States tell me that they subscribe to Anytime Fitness in the US.
Yeah.
And then because you can use it anywhere,
basically,
use their American subscription here because it's just more affordable.
Yeah, it's like I think it's around $20, $25 a month
in the US.
In the US,
wow.
And even so, for example, LA Fitness, I think it's one of the biggest commercial gyms in America. You got a sauna, you got a pool, you got a jacuzzi, you got a shower room, locker room.
But you've got more space in the US
You got
too.
more space. We have more space, and we can play around with the space, and it's only $30 a month. Or if you join with the family, it's like $23. Like US dollars. But over here, Anytime Fitness is like $60 for $50.
Yeah, it's about 8,000 yen per month. So I think that's what I'm paying.
Yeah, I think it's a lot more expensive over here. And for some people, it might be like, that's an average. But if you compare it towards, I lived in New Zealand for a little bit too, and I was only paying $15 a month for a gym membership. So that may be like one of the factors where inhibitors from people actually going into the gym,
but then
start exercising.
I would argue that you don't need a gym to exercise.
You really don't.
You could just go out to the park.
And I agree with you.
You could work out outside, push-ups. But what is the stance here in Japan towards exercise? Because when I grew up in Europe, and it's just popular. It's just people want to pick up the habits of going running, of maybe going to the gym, or maybe doing something else, doing some form of activity 2 to 3 times a day. Everyone wants to do something, even if it's just to show off.
But to show off, it's important.
In Japan, it never really, at least with my Japanese friends, comes up in the discussion like, I want to go and do this exercise, I want to try this.
And one is accessibility for sure. Like, I know you come from a European background, and I used to climb, and I love hiking as well. So hiking is like one of the big things, right? Like,
and you can do everywhere in Japan. 70% of the country is
it's mountain. But like when you think about it, it's like we have vehicle access a lot. We can just drive anywhere and just park it and then go hiking. Especially if you live in the middle of Tokyo or somewhere in a big city, I think like a public transportation system is great. Like, I respect it, and then it comes in time. It's definitely cheap, and it's a great way to travel, but it kind of limits your time. It kind of limits your time of like freedom of time, basically. So that might be one of the factors that's stopping people from actually going into like
because
exercise.
It's too troublesome to go to the mountains.
Yeah. It takes like an hour and a half, 2 hours to get to the mountain or a little hill. And would you want to,
Well, what's holding people back from just doing, I don't know, a more like a 20-minute yoga session at home in the morning, or to do just some more stretching or push-ups at home without needing to go anywhere?
So I've talked to several, right? Even with some of my clients who are starting it where you're coming from, I want to start, but I don't know where to start. Like, I don't know what to do. And I think that's one of the biggest thing. Like, the biggest factor is people just don't know what to do. Like, I'm seeing a lot of videos in YouTube saying like these bodybuilders are like doing crazy stuff. I'm like, am I gonna be like that if I go to the gym? I think that's one of the big question for especially a lot of females, girls that want to get fit, but like, I don't want to get bulky and stuff. And it's a misconceptions of like, if you go to the gym just for a day or two, or even a month, weeks, month, like, you're not going to be like The Rock, right? Yeah. And on that part, like, I think where I come in play, I have to like educate, and I have to like kind of give him like the information, like a correct information about like doing a yoga session at your home, doing stretches, and go on a run in the morning. It's very, very beneficial for not only for your health, but for your cardiorespiratory system. It decreases the chance of having cancer in a long run. There's not much downsides to going to the gym, going to exercise, do some form of physical movements throughout the week.
What's interesting is if you look at the Japanese education system, the just general schooling, you see kids from a young age have PE classes, sports and exercise classes, regularly throughout the week. When I run past Yodogawa, sometimes in the morning, I see the kids getting ready for soccer practice, getting ready for baseball practice. Some are just running. You see track and field clubs. They do a lot of exercise. boys and girls equally.
Yep.
But then when they graduate from high school and they enter university, it seems like it stops from one day to the next.
Yeah.
And what you're saying then is there seems to be a lack of education and combined with misconceptions about the consequences, positive and negative, of exercise, and basically how to do it as an adult in when you become like a shakaijin, right? A member of active member of society.
Yeah, I really hate that term, shakaijin.
Yeah.
It's like people are using that word as an excuse to not do something
because it implies that maybe you quote unquote too busy.
Yeah, so too busy. Like for example, like I live about an hour train ride away from the company. And every morning I'll have to leave my house at around like 6:40. And by the time I get to the office, it's like 8:20, 8:30ish, and you work until like 6 o'clock. Sometimes you have to work longer, right? And then if, let's say I leave my office at, like 6:37. By the time I got back to where my nearest station is about like 8:30ish.
So that's nearly 2 hours.
Like 8 o'clock-ish, because you have to walk to the station, take the train, like door to door, it's about an hour and a half. Sometimes a little bit shorter, but on average about an hour to hour and a half. And then you work out for about an hour. You go home, it's like 9:30, almost 10 o'clock. And I'm like, I'm so tired, I still have to work tomorrow. I think that's one of the inhibitors, one of the biggest barriers from like actually people wanting to do something, because that takes some hours
too
out
much
of your
commuting
time. Too much it's a huge commitment, and on top of it you're paying like 8,000 yen, which is not that cheap in Japan, right? Just to go to the gym.
Wouldn't then a kind of home gym approach and kind of popularizing the idea of working out at home, having a yoga mat and so on, be the solution towards kind of more exercise?
So I've had one of my old clients where like I would love to exercise, but I don't want to be in the gym environment, where her idea was like, I don't want to get judged by other people. And I may get a lot of hate on this too, but Japanese people are very superficially nice. They're very kind superficially, but they tend to be very, very judgmental towards somebody who's coming into the environment we're used to. So she's like, I don't want to get judged. I just want to work out in peace. And is there something that you can help me with? And I created like you need like a yoga mat, like a resistance bands, and maybe like a kettlebell or two. But like as long as you get those, you can buy those in like within $50 US, maybe cheaper sometimes. And I created a training program for her that you can do in your living room, which only takes 30 minutes out of your day. Just do it like 3-4 times a week. And she lost about 25 to 30 pounds in the course of 4 to 5 months. It's a very healthy rate. And now she loves working out. Now she loves running. She loves going to the hike. She's a great influence to her friend groups, right? Like, hey, let's go do something active rather than just going into a cafe in the middle of Tokyo and kind of relax, right? So
I think you just touched upon something that I think is quite important. Is like she did this for a few months, she saw results, and then as a consequence she feels happier and she feels more energetic towards maybe doing more of this. And I've had this conversation a few times with people that want to get started too, and they don't know where to start, how to start, and then they do, but they don't see results immediately within the first 2-3 weeks, and then it just looks like too much effort to keep going.
It is, and I agree.
So what I want to ask about is, what is now we covered a little bit the fact that on average Japanese people tend to be a bit skinnier, lighter, have a meal that has maybe less protein, although well balanced, and they don't exercise, and as a consequence, or they exercise less, less weightlifting, less training. What role does social media play into this? And so the angle I want to go at this question is, if I think of Western social media, we see gym bros, we see people just lifting a lot of weights, building muscle, posing in front of the camera. We also see a lot of content, like yoga is very popular. We see a lot of channels promoting it. Pilates.
Absolutely.
We see also a lot of home fitness. So you don't need to become so buff. You don't need to develop so many muscles. You can be super fit by doing these exercises at home, body weight, calisthenics.
Yeah.
We see a lot in the West. What about in Japan on social media? What are kind of like the fitness trends that people are promoting?
So I'm going to go from the Western side, right? Okay, so we have a lot of varieties. So we can do calisthenics, we can do powerlifting, weightlifting, cardio, CrossFit, you name it. There's everything. And you just Google it or YouTube it. There's a lot of, like hundreds and hundreds of videos.
You just need to watch one and then the algorithm will do it for you.
Just watch one, maybe like 30-minute home workout routine, like a 20-minute full body training routine, and it's accessible. But I think in Japan, and it is the same in America too, there's just so much information. And we're overflown by information. We just don't know what's accurate, what's great for you, okay, for example, something might work for you, but the exact same program might not work for me because they were different people, different biomechanics, different biology, different physiology. But there's so much information about one might say this is good, the other say this is bad. There's, person C might say this food is great for your health. Person D might disagree with it, right? And then you see it all the time.
And it works for fitness, and it works also for diets and everything, right?
Yeah, it's just so much information. You just can't. It's hard to decide which information you're going with and which is correct information, which is the false information.
But so what you're saying is that this kind of diversity we see in the West is also available in Japan.
It is available
on social
in Japan.
media.
Yeah,
they have the same amount of, let's call them influencers or content creators that promote various types of fitnesses here, just as in the West.
It is.
But whereas in the West, people tend to, I'll pick this and I'll do it and I like it. In Japan, the overflow of information is maybe also blocking people from getting into something.
And I think so. And just so much information, not much educational, maybe information that's backing out those, whatever the guy is saying, like, hey, like you should not be eating this. You shouldn't be eating this. You shouldn't be eating this. I'm like, what am I supposed to do? Like the other guy's saying you should be eating this. The doctor's saying this, but the other doctor is saying the opposite. Like, what am I going to do? So I think that's where I come in play, like guys like me who's experienced and have knowledge when it comes to fitness, health, and nutrition. Like we can kind of help them get into the right track and like have a great kickstart of their fitness life.
So what is required then is kind of a personalized approach.
Yeah, like personalized approach. Everybody's different, and there are a lot of courses out there online, and you can just find it. Just scroll down through Google, like 3 months program. They're like 90-day workout program, like a 30-day training routine, and it's out there. But like what works for you might not work for the other person. Like I said before, so the personalized programs and personalized approach to fitness. Like let's say you're my client. You come into me with, like, hey, I have limited time. I'm very busy, but I still want to get fit. I still want to be healthy. I still want to have a long life. I want to be able to move when I'm 80, 70s. Like, what can I do? And you come in with that idea, and I'm not going to give you like a bodybuilding routine, right? That's just so wrong. So I come in, go like, hey, so what's your current status? Like, what are you doing? And then we can build from there. Like, hey, do you have access to the gym? And if so, what kind of gym? Is it like more of a CrossFit gym, or is it like a commercial weightlifting gym? And we can evaluate your health and evaluate your environment that you're in. And then I'll adjust and customize your fitness program by having those information. So,
are a lot of Japanese seeking out this kind of personalized training?
There are a lot of personal trainers out there, but it is very expensive, first of all. So it's accessible, but only for somebody whose socioeconomic status is higher than the average. Because you're talking like almost $1,500 to $1,800 a month.
So then most people maybe don't have that money for this. So how can they kind of weed through everything that's on social media? How can more people actually get into this maybe more active lifestyle?
Definitely research for sure.
So it has to come from them.
It has to come from them. They have to be the initiatives. Like as much information as I can put it out there, and I can, post videos on there. I can publish a paper, but if they're not willing to bite into it, like there's nothing I can do about it. And if they come in, just say, hey, like a 5-minute phone call, 30 minutes consultation, like, yeah, I can help you with all that information.
We started getting into this conversation a little bit from like also potential maybe health issues. And you mentioned a lot of things, especially for women. There's the risk of having too low bone density or the FAT.
It's a female athlete triad.
And I read an article yesterday that was saying that on average, Japan is a country where people sit the most and the longest in a day.
Yeah.
Right. So we were talking about how people may get into fitness. And we know because many studies have shown that sitting too long at a desk all day long is bad for you.
Yeah.
You develop maybe lower back pain, you develop bad posture, which I certainly am developing from sitting too much. Isn't that reason enough for people to be willing to do the research? Do they not feel the kind of consequences?
I agree with you. And maybe they might not just be that interested in fitness. And I think, okay, so I'm going to give you stats. In Japan, on average, about 0.34% of the entire population have gym access. And whereas in America, it's 39%.
What is that? Gym access?
So you have a membership to the gym, or have a membership to the like a yoga studio or something. There's 100 times the difference. Japan's 0.35%, so that's 3 out of 1,000 people
that go to some kind of gym.
That goes to some kind of gym, or this is only gym membership. But in America, it's 39%, 34 to 39%. There's a huge difference in like different numbers. Like, and I thought about it, like why there's such a big differences in between the rate of individuals who haven't access to the gym is, first of all, going back to Japanese gyms are very expensive, and people might not want to commit to paying that much amount of money, and maybe they might start off good, like, hey, all right, okay, I'm gonna go to the gym like twice a week, 3 times a week. But imagine doing that with the hectic working hours that they have in Japan. It's as a culture, like you might not even have time to just even go to the gym. You leave at 7 a.m. You don't come back home until like 10 p.m. Like you just don't have time to go to the gym.
Yeah, and this is where you notice today we're recording this on a national holiday.
It is a national holiday.
I go to the gym early in the morning, and surprisingly, this morning was full because national holiday. Most people don't have to go to work, so they use the time to actually go and do their weekly training. But so socioeconomic factors do play a role in Japan.
Definitely, I believe so. And not only in Japan, same in States too. And like imagine just walking down the aisle in your whatever the grocery store that you go to. More organic, more like raw, only one singular ingredient groceries are definitely a lot more expensive than the one that's been processed and heavily induced with preservatives. And that goes the same in States too. So I think I definitely agree to the fact that socioeconomic status plays a huge role in individuals' health, like overall health.
I'm very curious about the portrayal of the positive outcomes of it, because all in all, we're talking about health and fitness as a way to just feel better in your body and maybe live a fuller life, so to say. And when we look at marketing from companies selling sports equipment, or when we look at marketing from companies selling food supplements, or we look at marketing from gyms, what is the kind of portrayal in Japan that they are trying to show of, like, if you consume this, if you practice this, if you do this, you're gonna feel a certain way?
Yeah.
Is it the same as in the US, where they wanna show you like kind of building self-confidence and looking strong and looking...
It's a dream idea, right? it's very interesting because a lot of the commercials, okay, I'm going to go with the commercials, right? So a lot of the commercials in Japan where they advertise health and product, like healthy products, it's very, very like Eastern medicine based. Whereas in America, it's like all those commercials and ads are very scientific based. So that might be and different cultures too, different like as parts that where we get interested in. Like in America, it's like, oh, I want to get big, stronger. Like if there's a gym membership, discount ads that's popping out, like, man, it might be a good time to get a gym membership. It's only $20 a month. Why not? The Japanese side is like very, the algae, right? Those commercial ads are very, very popular. Something that you can consume, and a lot of the ads in Japan are focused on becoming healthy, losing weight as a result.
Although you did say that generally speaking, a lot of people are already kind of below the average BMI.
Yeah. So that too, an idea of a diet. So the term diet, it's very different in Western and in Japan, like America and Japan.
So how is it different?
So as a definition, diet. So in the diet as a definition is the kind of food that a person, animals, or the community habitually consumes. So that's the definition of a diet.
So diet is just what you eat.
What you eat. Like in a day-to-day basis, and drink, and as a community consumes. But I feel like the term diet in Japan means like, oh, I have to get on a diet, like brackets, lose weight, right?
It was like that in the West too, though. I remember growing up in France, going on a diet. The purpose was, I mean, you say you go on a diet, right?
On a diet.
It's something you do temporarily.
Yeah, temporarily. But diet should be something that it should be part of your lifestyle. Like I follow a certain diet, and I'm sure you do follow a certain diet. Some people might follow like a vegetarian diet. Some people might do like pescatarian diet. So diet as a term is like I said, like a type of food and that you consume like in day-to-day basis. The Japanese definition is like diet is like, oh, I'm losing weight. So I think people are just so focused on like, oh, I have to shed all this weight. Like I'm big. I don't want to get judged.
So what they even think of themselves is they are, even though they may not be muscular or big or overweight, they think they're too big compared to the standards.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's a similar problem than in the West. Right?
Yeah, it's a very similar problem where Japan's on the extreme level. Like America, especially on eating disorders. So there are many different types of eating disorders, but so anorexia nervosa, which is you are obsessed with what you eat and you're obsessed with the idea of being overweight. So that's anorexia nervosa. And the other one's bulimia nervosa, which is the opposite. You just constantly eating. And bulimia is 1.6 times to two times more common in the West, where in Japan is anorexia nervosa is a lot more common. So there's a difference in commonality when it comes to eating disorders. So that might play a huge role when it comes to when you're looking at the statistics of individuals' weight being underweight, especially in Japan.
And what is being done about this?
I am not an expert when it comes to treating those disorders.
So what I mean more generally is not in terms of like treating the disorders, but kind of working against those trends.
So it comes into trend of like a present trend of beauty standards, right? One of the main thing is I think Japanese people tend to be very judgmental towards somebody's individual's like visual aspect of the person, appearances. People get very, very obsessed with how they look, and they don't want to get judged by other people. So, and that turns into like a very negative, like
so like it's higher social pressure than in the West, where people might be more individualistic and just be like, I don't care what the others think.
Yeah, I don't care. This is my life. I'm gonna do what I do, and even if I'm like 50 pounds overweight, like that's fine.
There's been this movement of body positivity.
Yeah,
right?
body positivity is a huge thing in America now. There you see a lot of models in different types and shapes, where back in the day it used to be like, you got to be tall and skinny, right?
Is it changing in Japan though? Are the trends changing?
Not that. I think they're still stuck to like being skinnier the better, whereas a lot of the West are kind of moving towards like, it's okay to be different. It's not that big a deal. And Japanese people tend to not want to be different from the others, right? That just, as in general, like it's in their culture. Like you kind of want to fit in, like you want to be the same with others. You don't want to like stand out too much. That might kind of I believe that's one of the factors it's a leading cause of eating disorders, especially anorexia nervosa in Japan.
Are there any other statistics in Japan that are maybe somewhat alarming? Well, we talked about the high rate of anorexia. There was a statistic that came out that Japanese people sit the longest. Is there anything else that kind of tends to highlight that perhaps the lack of exercise, the lack of maybe protein in nutrition or so on is leading to more and more common types of health issues?
So I'm sure whatever I'm gonna say is very controversial. So I'm not gonna like say this is the best way, but there was a study done that measured the Japanese women, females, the pelvic width and the pelvic cavity, where a baby comes out. It's a little huge hole that we have it too. And guys tend to be very narrow and shallow. And we have a very straight, narrow hip width, right? Pelvic hip, because we don't have to bear babies, right? Whereas females, they have to, carry babies. So it tends to be a lot wider and more angled compared to the male. And what they found was in the last couple decades, from 1970s, 60s, all the way up to 2020s, they found that the Japanese females' pelvic width is decreasing over time, which means it's harder for them to bear babies.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it turns into like a, and this is one of the only statistics. I'm not sure if this is like the correct, and I think the study size wasn't as huge as where I hoped to. I think it was around like only a few thousands. So I'm not sure if it applies to all the female population in Japan, but that turns into population issues. That turns into metabolic system issues. That all the way goes into like menstrual cycle issues, which is part of the menstrual disturbances. Is one of the issues of female athlete triad. So it's a whole cycle. Yeah.
You work a lot with athletes.
I work with a lot of that with athletes.
Do you know athletes? They don't necessarily have those problems of lack of fitness that we were discussing a little bit, because they do this professionally. What challenges are they facing here that are maybe
surprisingly? FATs are very common
with female athletes.
Yeah, I've seen a lot, especially eating disorders. So female athlete triad is, so you see it in about, I think the statistics, if I'm getting correct, about 15 to 60% of female athletes suffer from one of the symptoms of a female athlete triad. And
in Japan,
2 of 3 are, I think, around like 22.7 to 27%. So surprisingly high, even though they're athletes, right? They're exercising. One thing I see a lot is malnutrition. Malnutrition I see a lot, more than.
Can you define it a little bit? Like, what is it that you see with athletes here in Japan?
So when I work with one of the universities, I've collected what they consume throughout the week to 2 months.
So you make an inventory of.
So basically, I have them have a tracking system where they input all whatever they eat throughout the day, right, as accurate as possible, because you can't be 100% accurate. What I saw was they are about 30 to 45% under the ideal caloric intake.
So they don't eat enough.
Yeah, they don't eat enough
for the amount of exercise they do.
So, because they're athletes, they're like softball players, badminton players, they're their training is intense. I've seen it. It's very, very intense. They train hard as Americans do. But they just don't recover well. They don't eat enough. They're still like, oh, like I did all this exercise, but I ate some snack yesterday, so I'm gonna hold up on eating anything after training. I'm like,
well, they're human after all.
Yeah,
They're
like,
just like everyone else.
Come on, you gotta replenish your body with nutrition, like protein, fats, and carbs. I saw that in 80% of the female athletes that I saw had severe under caloric intake.
So this is then leading to similar consequences to everything we talked about before.
Because that part of it is like, oh, like I want to be skinny, right? Because you're an athlete. If you're an athlete, you're gonna build muscle. Like you may have thicker legs than others, and they don't like it. They want to be skinny as the models.
You want to be an athlete, but still be skinny.
Still be skinny and slim, and that causes that person to
eat and then have health issues.
And then train a lot, high intensity, high volume, and then goes into like, oh, I train much, but I'm not gonna eat that much, and it's like a whole cycle.
If we talk about solutions now, we talked about the influence of a little bit of social media. We talked about the need for education and dispelling misconceptions. What is currently being done, maybe generally, maybe government initiatives, also maybe by research institutes or by yourself to kind of shape the next few years and maybe provide more education?
Like, I'm not sure what's being done in like a government level or like institutional level, but there are a lot of guys that's promoting like, hey, you guys have to eat better, like have a better eating habits. And they drink. Japanese people love to drink too, so it's like they're trying to slowly promote the idea of like eating well versus eating a lot is a different story. Like eating well is like, you're not going to be eating McDonald's all day long. You're not going to be going into like Italian restaurant. Hey, I love Italian food. And like eating pizza all day long. Like, so eating well doesn't mean going to the fancy restaurants and eat high expensive stuff. Eating well means eating well-balanced food, well-nutritioned food, like vitamins, fruits, and you have minerals and all that, like protein, fats, and carbs. Versus eating a lot, it's like you can eat a lot of pasta, spaghetti, and pizza, but what are you getting? Only carbs and fats. So where's all the proteins from? So there's a huge difference between like eating well versus eating a lot. And people tend to kind of mix those two. Like, I'm eating well, like I'm eating a lot, like I'm good, but have you looked at
what you're actually
putting into your body? Because you are what you eat.
And so there are individuals now that are trying to promote this.
A lot of companies are trying to promote, and I'm also trying to always educate my clients like a nutrition 101, basically.
So you have to really start from the beginning.
Yeah, they really have to. And it's not that easy. It's not that hard, excuse me. It's pretty easy to eat well and have a balanced diet. It's not that hard.
When you do educate some of your clients and you talk with them and you kind of go through them, explain the nutrition or explain the exercise, do you see some reactions that are surprising that you've seen here in Japan that you'd never had maybe in the United States?
So there's an interesting story. I'm not gonna put the company's name out there, but there's a company, I'm sure people have an idea, where they promote like extreme diets, right? They show before and after videos. I'm sure you have an idea. You've seen it on TVs. And I've seen one of their like food list, like ingredients list where clients can eat and cannot eat. And I saw it and it was ridiculous. And I had a client where he used to be a client for them. And then he lost a lot of weight. He did lose, I think he lost like 45 pounds in 2 months.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. Like 20 kilograms in like 2-3 months. And like, are you healthy? Like, are you okay? Like, I was genuinely worried about his internal health. Like, outside he looks great. He had 6 packs. He had, he was somewhat built. So I like visually, like, okay, you're in pretty good shape, but are you healthy on the inside? How's your intestines acting? How are your organs doing? And I looked at his diet routine. It was just ridiculous. And so I had to kind of re-educate his idea of what's healthy food and what's not.
So it goes back to misconceptions.
Goes back to misconceptions.
What Japanese people sometimes consider as healthy, unhealthy, may be different than in the US, for example.
Yeah, it's very, very different. Yeah, people are afraid of carbs. That's everywhere. But people are afraid of carbs, and people take protein way too much. They're overflowing their diet with protein.
In Japan?
In Japan too, yeah.
So you generally speaking, they don't, but when they do, they just do too much.
It's overflown. So healthy amount of protein is about 0.6 if you're non-athlete. If you're non-athlete, I think it's around 0.5 to 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram that you weight. So let's say you're a 90 kilogram person. I don't know how much you weigh, but
much less, but yeah.
Okay, so around, all right, let's say if you weigh 70 kilograms and you multiply that by 0.8. So I think that's about 56 to 60 grams of protein. That's a FDA's recommended amount of protein that you consume a day. And protein has 4 calories per gram. So if you multiply that by 4, it's only like 260, 270 calories out of 2,000, like on average, right? 2,000 calories as a person. You only consuming protein like 1 of 10, basically. But when I see influencers and guys on YouTube they're like, oh, you have to eat twice your body weight, like 2.2 times your body weight. And that's like 200 something. And that is very, very unhealthy. That is just not good for you. Like, it could damage your liver. It could damage your kidneys. So there are a lot of negative side effects of eating too much protein too. So you have to be in a very sweet spot, right? In terms of everything.
So it's a difficult situation, but I mean, these kind of health concerns are global.
It is global, yeah. Same in America too.
But interestingly, in Japan, maybe the perceptions of things is reversed.
It's reversed. It's very, very reversed. Yeah.
What we are seeing in the West.
So that's one thing I found out, or what I discovered when I first moved over here. Just people's ideas and their knowledge is the opposite from America. And where you want to be is the middle, right? The West takes too much on this side, and Japan takes too much on this side. You want to be in the middle.
You do research.
Yes, sir.
Do you think there are any specific researches that are not done, but that you think it would be very interesting to study this and figure out something which could then be helpful?
Man, that's interesting. I've done some research targeting cerebral palsy, individuals who's suffered with CP, and I've done some aquatic therapy research that it can be beneficial and increase the QOL. But it's something that it's not being done, but it's something that I would love for them to do. That's a very difficult question.
What about the study that is being done that you think this is important? I'd like to work on it and have this study known on a wider scale.
Yeah, for sure. So that goes back to where I was talking about earlier, how our ancestral biology plays a role in our current diet, right? So you have you always have a Western background, right? Yeah, and I have an Eastern heritage.
Who knows?
Maybe we're mixed, but do we digest and do we go through a digestive process differently, even though we're in the exact same diet, exact same environment, exact same amount of workout? Is there a difference?
So basically study kind of genetics and ancestry. And
I want to see if there's genetics and DNAs and our heritage plays a role in our current diet, in how we
process
food and nutrition. I would love to see a study that's been done.
Interesting. Well, maybe you'll get to do that soon enough.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
We covered quite a few things. We talked about the health standards a little bit. We talked about diet. We talked about fitness being different here in Japan. Is there something that we haven't covered that you feel like maybe we should touch upon that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think I would love to see where it takes us from here. especially like Japan's kind of becoming more open to the outside world. Like I want to see how Japan's going to evolve from now, especially when Japanese populations are decreasing and we need more foreigners, we need more immigrants, we need more entrepreneurs. Like we need some outside influence that changes the core idea of, I appreciate Japanese culture. I love it. There are some stuff that needs to be changed, and some of the, like rituals or some of the stuff that we do in Japan needs to be adapted in America or in the West as well. So I want to see a mixture of like different cultures while keeping the identity of each, which is super hard. It goes back to the conversation of identity that we've had before podcast.
Before recording, where
before recording. But I think that plays a huge role of the future of Japan and its culture.
So do you think that then these kind of import of culture, foreign cultures, will also affect health and lifestyle standards and fitness standards?
Definitely, yeah, for sure.
Maybe we will need more gyms then. Who knows? Or
we just need bigger gyms. The bigger, the better. Just kidding, but yeah.
Yeah, but I think there's a lot to be done then to kind of promote education on health and fitness in Japan, and maybe change the messages. Maybe less advertisements promoting how healthy beer after work is, and more pushing for the workout after.
And it's great though. Beer after work is one of the best things ever.
Yeah, with moderation.
With moderation, of course. Yeah, but yeah, thanks. I would love to. I would love to see it. I would love to be part of that. And I think people are like more and more people are realizing like health is important
in Japan.
In Japan too. Yeah, like you have to be. Like you can live long, but your health age is a different story, right? So like you want to increase that, like you want to have that as long as you can. So
there's this realization that you can't just eat a balanced meal and go on about your day, but you need to be maybe more proactive.
Yeah, maybe a little bit more proactive. Maybe drink more water, have nature like exposure, get more sunlight. Go out to the hill, hike, do something more active, and that will definitely increase your quality of life. That's just my opinion, and I believe it.
Well, thank you, Toshi, for sharing and telling us a little bit about health trends in Japan, fitness trends, and showing us that, well, interestingly, perceptions are swapped compared to the West. And let's see where the next few months, years will go, and if we maybe have positive trends coming out. Thank you for sharing. Thank you, everyone, for listening today. This was Unpacking Japan, and we'll see you again next week. Bye.